There is an art to being a warrior, and it's something that must be learned. There's training, experiences that we enter into where God has our training in mind. Freedom is very fragile. It was John Eldredge who once said, "Steps towards life and freedom are opposed." It's not just one training or a merit badge or something that we earn and it's done. No, this is on-the-job training. This is learning as we go in hundreds, maybe thousands of different situations, how to step in, how to play our part well, how to love well. So come with us as my friends and I explore what it looks like to be trained up by God into this image that we bear and what it is that we hope to bring to the world that God has put in us and on us to offer to the hearts of others. Because we've established that there is evil, this unholy trinity, like you said, Jim, that we're up against, then it just makes sense that we're going to need training. We're going to need to learn how to defend ourselves, and we're going to need to learn how to advance the cause, the kingdom. So there's an academic side to training, and then there's something that's experiential, right? You're supposed to know how it works, maybe some of the engineering of the kingdom, the two kingdoms at war over our hearts. But then there's on the ground, you know how it works, and now you are experiencing how it works, and you know what to do. You know, you want a surgeon who has been trained. He's gone through the academics, but he also has a practice. He can practice this. An athlete, I mean, they've hit so many balls. They've shot so many balls. They've done it, the repetition, the fundamentals, right? The basic training. These are huge pieces, and yet we've somehow thought that, as you said, the hard parts about training wouldn't be in Christianity. You know, the learning how, that somehow it would just come natural, it would just kind of flow. Has that been your experience?
I can remember when I was with a ministry that I was on staff with for years, I became the area director. And in my flesh, that false self, okay, this is an opportunity to prove something.
I'm in charge. Yeah.
I'm in charge. I'm going to apply myself, and I'm going to take hell with a squirt gun. I mean, I was going to dominate it, and it was going to be, it was task driven. You've been a slacker. You need to step it up. I mean, it was nuts. And it took me to a place.
Now, wait, you're in ministry?
I'm in ministry, yeah.
just clarifying.
Loving, yeah,
you know,
I'm
just bringing that back in there, yeah.
So it took me to a place beside my bed, on my knees, with my face in my hands, realizing that there was so much anxiety and there was so much turmoil, and it began a transition of me being transformed from the inside rather than taking and even training so many things on the outside. And so as God reshaped my heart, really began that process for me years ago, and it's still ongoing. Right. That was a hallmark. I mean, that was a moment in time of realizing that it wasn't about what I was doing. It was about who I was becoming and who was loving me and how well I was doing in loving other people.
So learning what to do is a really important piece of training.
Sure, it was important, but...
And what you're talking about, though, is learning what not to do.
Sure.
Certain areas of our lives being exposed. And if I look at those as training, it changes things. Not condemnation, not being graded, not the old performance scale that I lived from for so long. But here's this kindness of God to show me some areas. Okay, we're going to work on this, and that's not it. This is what I want to put in your life, because why? I want to entrust more to you. I need to entrust more to you. There are lives in tow here, and I need you to step into this training.
Well, Michael, when you told me you were writing a book about becoming a warrior and the concept of training to go with it, my heart doesn't initially think of, I need trained on how to love. But of course I would. If life is about learning to receive and offer love, then I feel, I'm realizing that God wants me to experience that more and restore and make whole maybe what's been left along the way. And so we start this chapter on training, but it's about love. And so you have this Victor Hugo quote. You say, where Victor Hugo says, "Life's greatest happiness is to be convinced we are loved." Initially doesn't sound like training until I realize what it's all really about and what I'm being trained for.
And Victor Hugo is the same guy that we love that wrote probably one of the greatest love stories ever, Les Mis. And in Les Mis, as we know, Jean Valjean is accused of a minor crime and is incarcerated for a very long time, and his total self-esteem is completely deflated. He gets out and has freedom, theoretically, but doesn't feel free, doesn't appropriate the freedom. And so he reverts to stealing. And so he steals the silver from the bishop, and he gets caught by the police. The police bring him back to the bishop, and the bishop says, no, he didn't steal it. Here's more stuff for you. You forgot the candlesticks. And there's just one wonderful scene that we all love where the bishop just goes face to face, nose to nose with Jean Valjean, and he speaks truth into his heart. And he takes his hood, Jean Valjean's hood, and takes it down, kind of revealing this new creation. And he says, Jean Valjean, you are forgiven. I have redeemed you. I've restored you. And live that new life, not the old life. What a great scene.
So we're new.
Love.
It's such a good scene. So we're new, and we're learning how to live new. It's true, and then it plays out. That's why training is so important. I remember when we first started exploring a lot of this stuff together, basic training felt advanced.
Sure.
Right? I mean, it was new. And I'm with you, Jay. There's still concepts of the Christian life that scripture and prayer and meditation and worship. I mean, but these things have taken on a new flavor, a new connotation in our lives. So where did God, if you can think back, where did God start some of your basic training? Where did he, because we're not all in the same place. Our stories are so unique and so different. It's not, okay, let's put everybody into module 1, 2, 3. But where might he have started you in your basic training of learning how to love, being new, living newly?
Like Jean Valjean, a man found me. A neighbor started pouring into my life. And one of the first lessons or things that I started to understand, I probably had heard it, but I'm 40-some years old and I didn't really believe it, is that who God is. That he wants a personal relationship with me. He created me for a personal relationship. So, I mean, that's 101. I mean, that's even pre-101, who God is. But as you said earlier, Michael, you learn the scriptures, you see who he says he is, but until you experience him, till you experience his love. And so for this gentleman, my neighbor, to help me to understand who he was and then to encourage me to experience who he was. I mean, that was 101 for me, but it was also, I mean, it continues today, obviously, because it's so important.
Right. Similar to you, Jim, my training started as the Lord showed me how to receive love. Coming from a family where we worked hard, we gave, it can be sometimes hard to learn to receive. So I'm sitting at one of our conferences, I take a question to God, and it was probably something like, Lord, how do you see me? And I had a newborn son, a few months old, and God said, think about how you hold your son. And I immediately pictured him in my arms. And I'll never forget, he said, you're just starting to learn and know how I feel about you, as I thought about my son in my arms. I needed that package for my heart, but that was where the training began, as I learned to receive his love.
That's different than push-ups and sit-ups, but it's no less fundamental to the strength of your heart, to the need that you're going to have as you enter into these battles, advancing the kingdom, guarding your heart. I mean, what a great story to see basic training move in that direction. Right? It's understandable. You get it. It makes sense. How about you, Jay, in this?
I think for me, I would have to go back to about 10 years ago when I felt like I began this journey of understanding my own story. And as I went through that process and I was asking myself those questions that we ask each other and that we've asked many men over the years, is where do you pose? What is where does the false self rise up in you? What voice do you hear from your own father? And all of those very good questions that we can ponder. And I think understanding my story and walking through that and asking God a lot of questions, it really transformed how I was loving other people, because I realized that they have a story. So the best way I can love someone is to try to understand their story. And that brings a lot of compassion and mercy and seeking to understand, rather than even trying to change people. Because we do that often. We want people to line up to be a certain way because it meets our needs, because the story's about us. And we've missed all of it.
Yeah.
So I think in understanding my own story and then seeking to understand the story of somebody else, I think of my wife, Christy, and understanding her story. That helped our already, which was a very, very good marriage, it helped our marriage continue to flourish, and me seeking to understand her. And I think that was really transforming from the inside out, and being a little and more compassionate and more loving.
I hope the encouragement for men watching right now is, though the first half of the book is about becoming the beloved son and beginning a healing process, we're turning into training, but the reality is that training has already begun. If you started to dig into that, becoming a beloved son, learning to love and have eyes to see, you're already a few miles into your training. It starts there.
Yeah, and that stays there. You said the foundation, it's central. So that identity, not the false self, that identity is the beginning of our training. For me, I think one of the most significant pieces of basic training in my own life was this idea of discernment. Eyes to see, ears to hear, and discerning between good and bad. I think I just was so, ramped up in doing, performing, attaching strings to all that, so that other people are doing what I need them to do. So to gear down and to slow down, like you said at another session, that was painful and relieving at the same time, as God began to invite me to, we need to teach him how to discern and approach things a little slower, and to take thoughts captive. And it started to change things. Almost right away. To live curiously, to embrace question marks, versus spout off the advice. In counseling, it's a tremendous art and practice to ask questions in order to understand what it really is. And I know in the coaching, as Jim, you have that credential as a coach of men, you help them discover the truth.
Right.
It's a huge part in my life. I loved, and I continue to use that day to day in discernment, eyes, ears, listening, and asking question marks. I'm so grateful for that training module, right? For that skill set. And it served me, not just as a beloved son, hugely there, because the receiving part that you talked about, Blake, but also in, okay, what is this, God? What are we stepping into? What's going on with my daughter? What's this that seems to be affecting my friend? It takes more time, but that's exactly what God was after in my life, establishing that training.
Well, Michael, I know the false self, especially mine, is so afraid of questions. It is about declarations and definitions and manipulating conversations to get the outcome that I'm looking for, which is I am okay. And trying to keep questions under control and staying away from them. But as I can settle in and now want to open up to see what's really going on, to discern all those voices I'm hearing, whose voice am I hearing? Yeah. Those question marks become your friend. And you're desperate to start asking those, where's God in this? Where's the enemy in this? And where am I a victim or getting pulled into a lesser story when God may ask me to stand up into more?
Imagine if you were just one question away from clarity, maybe 2 questions away from really understanding what it was, and you don't go there, you just jump in. I mean, we all have stories of how that doesn't go so well. I want to go back, as we wrap this up, I want to go back to something you said earlier about what all the basic training is really about. Love. Right? Being trained up how to love.
And that sounds so simple. But it's not, is it?
I'm still in training. I'm still learning. But when we look at Jesus' life, this is what he was so good at.
Yeah, and he
And it
is
makes
our
sense that he wants to make
example.
us good at it.
Sure.
Yeah, what'd you say? Go ahead, Jay.
Well, he's the perfect example, obviously, of how to love. There's a great passage in John 13, verse 34. Jesus says, "A new command I give you, love one another." But there's a disclaimer in that verse. He says, "As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another."
1 John says the same thing. And is it Ephesians that says you love with the love that you're compelled to love with the love I've given you?
But when we think of how Jesus loved, that changes things, because we can love in a variety of different ways. And a lot of times we love the way we want to be loved, rather than, okay, how did Jesus love? He loved unconditionally. He embodied grace and truth. How do we deliver that? And it's a deep learning process.
Put yourself in their shoes. How do you think those guys in that first century huddle with Jesus, how do you think that landed? As I have loved you, so love one another. But when you look at this, love one another, as I have loved you, those guys must have went, whoa. Right? The fireside chats they had with Jesus, the walking on the road, the meals they had with Jesus. Do you think those 11 guys, 12 guys knew love? How? Academically?
They were experiencing it.
I think each one of them thought, love like you've loved me, and that took them someplace. That gave them the picture of, and then what do we see those men do? What do we see those men become? Fierce, loving men. And they learned it through the training with Jesus, just like we will get to, need to, because the world needs more men who are settled and who can, and therefore from that place of belovedness can then love well, fiercely love well, fight for the kingdom. And what's Proverbs 4:23 say?
Guard your heart.
Yeah, above all else, guard your heart. Guard your heart, and then step in, enter in for the hearts of others. That's why this training is so critical, and why we need to explore it, be with God on a journey of training, knowing that once we've finished one thing that we're not supposed to do, we might be entering into another thing that He wants to equip us and give us, to entrust to us the kingdom, its ways, so that we might be the men who show up in moments that need a good man to show up in those moments.
The theme of what we're talking about in this training is a little bit counterintuitive, because when you're receiving, when you're listening, when you're waiting, you're not controlling. And I feel much more comfortable controlling than I do waiting and listening and receiving.
As my friends and I have shared, I want to encourage you, every man out there, you can do this. You can make this shift from healing the wounds that created the false self that we all so often were operating from. That's the old man, and that's the old life. So now it's your turn. You talk among your friends. Talk about what is it that God's been up to in training you? How has He been preparing you? What is it that He's wanting to entrust to you that only you, only your part, your role, only your heart can carry the weight of into this world that's waiting, looking, wanting you to step in?